Hi, welcome to another episode of Counterpunch with Trevor Loudon. Please like the show, share it as much as you can. We need to get the truth out there about the unfolding communist revolution. Well, today I'm going to go down under. I'm not going to focus on America so much today. I'm going to focus on my home country of New Zealand. Now, I'm sure many of you are aware of New Zealand's Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. She's a young lady. She's been lionised in the world press. She came to prominence after the horrible massacre at the mosque in Christchurch. She was on the world stage and she's never really left it. You know, the left really admire her, but there is another side to Jacinda Ardern, and I think people need to know about it. Now, she's raised a lot of eyebrows in recent times in New Zealand because she's proposing laws that will clamp down on freedom of speech like nothing that's ever been seen before, and that's causing a lot of concern. She's also going out of her way to change the governmental structure of the country, giving the native race, the Maoris, institutional rights, affirmative action government. This has been a long time communist program, and she is implementing it, which is also causing a lot of concern. And on the international stage, she is leading the country into the arms of China.
I'm delighted to welcome the signing today by trade ministers of the upgrade to New Zealand's free trade agreement with China.
New Zealand for a long time has been a member of the Five Eyes. That is America, Britain, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, all allied Anglophone countries that have been sharing information since the end of World War II, basically to counter first the Soviets and more recently the Chinese and other threats. And it's a very valuable arrangement for New Zealand to be part of. The left in New Zealand doesn't think so, but most rational people are quite happy with the arrangement. And so she has been basically saying on the world stage that the Five Eyes really isn't that necessary. Her foreign minister, Nanaia Mahuta, has been talking about how we need to cultivate our trade relationships with China and that Five Eyes isn't quite so valuable.
It's important as we navigate our way through the relationship with China, because we have a significant population here in New Zealand and they are our largest trading partner, that we can continue to have dialogue.
And that's as, you know, intelligence experts have been talking that New Zealand may well be kicked out of the Five Eyes. The Five Eyes may become the Four Eyes. And I didn't mean to say that. The Five Eyes may become the Four Eyes. That will have very serious implications for New Zealanders, very serious implications for the West. I'm sure Australia doesn't want a China-friendly country on its doorstep. It's not a good thing, and this is causing a lot of problems. And there's been a lot of commentary about this. And people say, wow, you know, this is a bit silly of New Zealand doing this, and why would they want to align with China and all this kind of thing. It's very obvious. It is because Jacinda Ardern is a hardcore leftist, as are most of her cabinet. She's always been a hardcore leftist. I would say she is a small c communist. You know, not a member of the Communist Party, but broadly in sympathy with communist aims. And I'm just going to talk about now why I believe that to be true. And I hope you'll find what I have to say interesting. Jacinda Ardern is pretty chummy with Cuban officials in New Zealand. You know, Cuba got a diplomatic presence in New Zealand a while back, and they have made hay. They're cultivating our politicians, Green Party politicians, National Party politicians, but especially the Labour Party politicians when they are in power. And Jacinda seems very okay with that. But if you go back into her history, in 2008, 2009, around that time, she was the international president of the International Union of Socialist Youth. Now, you'll see her here at a conference in Hungary about 2009. Count the comrades.
Comrades, then and only then will we win the war. Will we win the war on poverty?
See, somebody sent me an email, a video actually last Friday, and it had you talking at the Socialist Youth, Socialist Union International, whatever it's called.
Yes.
And you mentioned the word comrade about 4 times in a minute. What was that about?
It was a rally, and I would have been about 25 years old, and it probably would have been in Hungary.
It was in 2009.
It would have been in Hungary, was it, or was it in...
It was in 2000.
And you'll see her here when she was challenged about that, she doesn't seem particularly apologetic, does she? So we got to understand the International Union of Socialist Youth is the youth wing of the Socialist International. Now that was set up after World War II to basically as an alliance of socialist parties all over the world. In recent years it's got a lot less socialist and a lot more communist. When the former communist parties of Eastern Europe started joining, you knew there was a problem. You know, the Socialist Party of Bulgaria, which used to be the Communist Party of Bulgaria. The Socialist Party of Albania, which used to be the Communist Party of Albania. The Socialist Party of Poland. All of these parties have joined, as have the Nicaraguan Sandinistas, Fatah, the terrorist group from the Palestinian territories, Frelimo, the former Communist Party from Mozambique, and a whole range of others. The Communist Party of China has had observer status at the Socialist International. The Socialist International is effectively a communist organisation today. So when Jacinda Ardern was the president of that, that should raise some pretty big alarm bells. But in New Zealand they think, well, that was just when she was young and it's only the Socialist International, it's not the Communist International. Well, actually it is a Communist International and she was a leading part of it. She still has contacts from that era. Here she is with her old friend Daraka Larimore Hall. He's from Southern California. He's a bigwig in the Democratic Party down there, very well connected, knows all the Democrats, stood for the leadership of the California Democratic Party, based out of the Santa Barbara area. But he is also a leading member of Democratic Socialists of America, a communist group. You know, Democratic Socialists of America is the biggest Marxist group in the country. It works with the Communist Party USA, Liberation Road, all of the main communist parties, has connections to former East German communists, European communists, Latin American communists, etc. So here's Jacinda Ardern with her Marxist friend Daraka Larimore Hall. Now, it's well known that Jacinda is the protege of the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Helen Clark. She was Prime Minister for about 9 years. She left New Zealand, went to become number 3 in the United Nations, and was a reasonably popular figure, especially on the left internationally, much like Jacinda is today. But people need to understand that Helen Clark, and most New Zealanders have no idea of this, Helen Clark was heavily involved with Maoist politics when she was at university. She was influenced by Marxist professors like Ruth Butterworth. She was part of HART, Halt All Racist Tours, which was run by Maoists like Trevor Richard and Mike Law, and she was very, very actively involved with those people. A bit later on, she was on the fringes of the Socialist Unity Party, the pro-Soviet Communist Party of New Zealand at the time. During the 80s, she was a big supporter of the Nicaraguan Sandinistas. She would go over to Nicaragua. She tried to get support from the New Zealand Labour Party, which she led, to support the Sandinistas. She was also tied to very much supportive of the revolutionary movement in the Philippines, which of course was a Maoist movement led by the Communist Party of the Philippines, the Maoist group. Jacinda Ardern also doesn't have much problem hanging around with Maoists. Look here, she's with the First Union in Auckland. That's led by Robert Reid, a former leader of the Workers' Communist League. And right there is Maxine Gay, also another former member of the Workers' Communist League, Maoist communist group. And right there on the left is Dennis Mager. Dennis is a former leader of the International League of People's Struggles. That's an international gathering of Maoist groups headed by Jose Maria Sison, the founder and long-time leader of the Communist Party of the Philippines. Now, when Jacinda stood and entered Parliament in 2017 in a by-election, her campaign manager was a young man called Brendan Lane. Now you can see photographs here. Here's Brendan standing behind Jacinda. So he got her into Parliament effectively. He ran her campaign. Well, Brendan Lane, anybody who was at Auckland University in the mid-90s would remember Brendan Lane. he was a Maoist. He was a hardcore Maoist, a member of Radical Society. That was founded by a former member of the Workers' Communist League after that group dissolved. So the Radical Society basically ran student politics at Auckland for a while. It expanded into Wellington, into Victoria University, and even for a little while into Canterbury University in Christchurch, where I came from. The head of the Radical Society at Canterbury in the mid-90s was a Peruvian who had been allegedly a supporter of the Sendero Luminoso Maoist terrorists, and he had to get out of the country because the authorities were on his tail. So Radical Society supported the Communist Party of the Philippines. Some of its members actively supported the Communist Party of China, and they worked very closely with a group called the Aotearoa Youth Network. Well, Brendan Lane, you know, the thing in New Zealand, you'll find a lot of Labour politicians and Green politicians come out of the student movement. Many of them have been served as presidents of student executives, or, you know, the president of the Victoria University Students Association or the Auckland University Students Association. And for many years, from the 60s and well into the 90s, these groups were very deeply infiltrated by Maoist communists. So you found that these people would be Maoists in college, and then they would go into the Labour Party, and they ended up as, you know, deputy prime ministers, or, you know, finance ministers, or etc. And it's a very common phenomenon. Well, here's a photograph of the New Zealand University Students Association back in the 90s. Now, if you look here, here's a guy called Stephen Collett from the Massey University Students Association. He was involved with the Aotearoa Youth Network. There you have Elena Ashby, who is a hardcore leftist who was at the Waikato Students' Union. And over here you have Brendan Lane of the Auckland University Students Association. And who's right next to him? It wouldn't be Graham Robertson, would it? Who was a bigwig at the Otago University Students Association and who is now Deputy Prime Minister under Jacinda Ardern. You see, it turns out that Grant Robertson was also involved in the Maoist-leaning Aotearoa Youth Network. See, this is how it works, folks. The New Zealand Labour Party and the Green Party, which is even more communist, has been heavily infiltrated over many years by hardcore leftists. And Jacinda Ardern is just one more example of this. Several of Jacinda Ardern's cabinet have hardcore radical backgrounds, and a whole bunch of Labour MPs came out of the communist or socialist movements. Same with the Green Party. Jacinda Ardern is leading the country into the arms of China. She's clamping down on free speech. She is working overtime to transform the politics of the country, to give the native Maori race, you know, affirmative action political power in the country. That is part of the long-term communist program that started with the Communist Party of New Zealand in the 1950s, and she is carrying it out. But the problem is most New Zealanders, like most Americans, have no idea that there is a communist movement in New Zealand, let alone that it has deeply penetrated the Labour Party, that it completely controls the Green Party, and is working to transform New Zealand right before their eyes. Now, a lot of people say, well, this can't be true. New Zealand is still a free country and business is still prosperous. Well, New Zealand is a wonderful country. The people are fantastic, but the politics are being transformed. That doesn't mean they're going to be Chinese tanks rolling down Lambton Quay in Wellington tomorrow. What it means is the education system is going to be gradually transformed. It means that the radicals who control the Maori movement are going to get more and more power. It means the legal system is going to be transformed, and New Zealand foreign policy is going to be steered away from Australia and America towards China, Vietnam and other communist countries. That's what it means. And slowly freedom will die in my country. Now business, people say, well, business is still prospering. Yeah, well, it is to a degree. The communists have learned long ago that you don't clamp down and close down the businesses like they did after the Bolshevik Revolution or in China. They don't do it that way now. They do all the social stuff first. They leave the business for last. So that sort of puts people a little bit to sleep. They think, well, businesses are still prospering, business is doing okay, so the government can't really be communist, or they'd be coming after the businesses. The businesses come last now. They will be clamped down on, but everything else will happen first. So I hope my Kiwi fellow countrymen will distribute this video. I hope you'll pass it round, because I'm worried about the country. I'm very much worried about what's happening to my homeland, and I would like to raise awareness of this. There's an election coming up in a year or two. This is a chance to turn it round. The national opposition is also been pretty compromised by the Chinese, I have to say. But there are good politicians there. There are people in the ACT Party, the New Zealand Conservatives, who really do care about what's happening to this country and are willing to stand up to China and the local communists. So let's just see how it goes, folks, but please pass it around. I hope Americans have found this interesting too, because we all know that Jacinda Ardern has been lionized by some elements in the American press, and I think even Americans will benefit by seeing a different side of the story and understanding why New Zealand's membership in the Five Eyes is in jeopardy right now, and why that is a very, very bad thing. So thanks for watching, folks. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you will like the show and share it around, and we will see you soon. So God bless America, God bless New Zealand, and God bless all of you. Thanks very much.